You're listening to Talk Star Wars, a proud member of the Star Wars Commonwealth Podcast Network. Check us out on the web at starwarscommonwealth.com and take your first steps into a larger world. Talk Star Wars is a production of Emotionally 14. For fantastic podcasts, video series, blog posts, and much more, visit us on the web at emotionally14.com and enjoy content for the permanently teenaged. Hello there, and welcome to Talk Star Wars, episode 200.
Woo!
From emotionally14.com. I'm your host, as always, Rob Wade, and I'm joined by the Chewie to my Han with the similar long service to match, Brad Harmer Barnes.
Yeah. I'm the Star Wars character A to your Star Wars character B. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
We've made it.
We did.
We got there.
Well, I turned up towards the end.
Yeah, we got some. We had there were some times where the pace has slowed, where we've been life gets in the way. It happens, right? But we got there. We are here, right?
Yeah.
And it's nice. It's in no way surprising. I mean, certainly that was always the plan to get to 200. Because why would you just give up at 197? That's just weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
Who does that?
That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Start on finish with a nice number. Preferably divisible by 6 is good.
Yeah,
because that gets me out of one.
Don't do a prime number.
No, this is it. And
or do individual seasons, all of which have a prime number of episodes.
Oh, that's just unnecessarily complex.
Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
right. Season 1 is one episode.
Season 2 is 2 episodes.
Yeah, I guess
1 episode again.
Yeah, I think it's no. I think you're right. I think it's one again.
Season 3 would be 2. So it's 1, 1, 3.
I should know this.
4, 7.
Yeah.
11,
I think. Yeah.
18.
Yeah.
No, I'm losing track now.
Anyway, you didn't come here for Talk Fibonacci.
Yeah, which is probably a podcast.
I mean, you'd hope, wouldn't you, at this point?
Yeah.
The market is so
gone.
Yeah, the market is so crowded.
I'm more surprised when I go looking for a podcast and there isn't one.
Yeah, the market is so crowded, not in a bad way by any stretch. There is a lot of stuff there, and I feel like most niches will have been served somewhere,
Yeah. They've gone up the ventilation shaft.
Exactly. Yeah, that's coming soon. 2020.
Yeah.
They've gone up the ventilation shaft, the podcast. It's not, just so we're clear.
No.
Do have I have an announcement later in the show, but it's nothing to do with ventilation shafts. So we begin episode 200 with a message from Vesuvi, who has been as big a part of it as anybody, I would say, in getting to 200, with a constant, beacon of love and support. Mm-hmm. And Vesuvi writes, "Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Brad.
You're welcome, Vesuvi.
Thanks, small pubs in rural Kent. Thanks, psychic medium parrots."
Yes, of course.
I do not remember that bit.
We were talking about my local Wetherspoons and the picture of T. Lawrence.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah. You should listen back to your own episodes. They're really quite funny.
The pubs in rural Kent bit I remember, but the psychic medium parrots I have no recollection of. It
was a tenuous link to Lawrence of Arabia through my local town.
Oh, yeah. I do remember now, yeah. Thanks.
You should listen back to your own episodes, man. You're a funny guy.
All right, I appreciate it. That's kind of you to say. And I'll listen back to this and play that over and over again until I wear out the digital, because that's how fast work.
It's going to be his new message tone.
Only when you text me. Yeah. So you'll never hear it because you'll be there.
Yeah.
Thanks, keychains bearing Death Star tech. I would still buy one of those.
Yeah, totally. They come in handy.
Yeah. Thanks, Zapruder film cut of the security hologram of youngling killings at the Coruscant Jedi Temple. That I do remember.
Lost me now.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay,
I think I mentioned it being a Zapruder film. Because my brain goes to weird places.
Yeah.
Dee's spiel on the startling frequency of death faking in Star Wars was brilliant. We had a lot of good feedback about the D.
He was so good.
It was great.
Yeah. I think we all want to be given the D.
I love the D. And that will be clipped and used against me later.
There's my message tone.
Since you asked about what minor characters I'd love to see fleshed out in Disney Plus series, recast with hot, relevant performers, of course.
Shots fired.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we were ever suggesting that we would take the roles. Because, I'd like to believe that we'd be busy with cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Cammy Marstrap.
Marstrap. Cammy Marstrap.
I wondered, you were bobbing, and I could see you bobbing before I said it, and I was sitting there going, "What's he doing?" Acmina and the Tonica Sisters, surefire stuff. I thought the Tonica.
Really? Do we need an Acmina?
I don't know. The Tonica Sisters, I think, would be cool.
Yeah, I can see that in kind of a Charlie's Angels type way, maybe.
Yeah, weren't they like in Legends? Weren't they assassins or spies? Spies,
secret agents. I think. Yeah,
secret agents. That's right. Not assassins. Secret agents.
I mean, they probably had to do a bit of that.
They probably had to do a bit of
territory, didn't it? I mean, you'd have to just look at
bit of wet work.
Cassian Andor.
Yeah, bit of wet work. Sometimes you need to do what needs to be done.
I don't need. If you're all right, who's a hot relevant version of B. Arthur to play Acmina? Who's a hot relevant
Rebel Wilson?
Arthur. I mean,
I'd watch that. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to remake the holiday special. That comes with its own problems.
Yeah, that or
that in that I won't watch it. You can't make me. But apart from that, it's perfect.
Yeah.
So you may find this amusing, but every time you audibly thank me on an episode of Talk Star Wars, I give a Lando-style 2-finger salute, even though I'm usually the only one in the room. No, not that one. Brad's just given me a 2-finger salute on the camera. Yeah. No, I think it's...
Yeah.
Everything's coming up Millhouse, Vesuvi, Night of the Commonwealth. P.S. Make sure your A99 Aquata breather is attached to your Jedi utility belt before you go on missions.
Okay, Robin.
P.P.S. Since this is likely being read during TSW's 200th episode...
she's good.
She is good. Congratulations on the milestone, my dears.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
2 of them.
Yeah, and, absolutely, I say, I will return the sentiment, I'll repeat it, the one I said earlier. Vesuvi, you have been as big a part of it as we have in terms of getting us to 200. And that goes for everybody who's written in or interacted in some form generally, but especially Vesuvi. Because Vesuvi has been an absolute mainstay in terms of sending in messages. We've had recaps of The Mandalorian that I still feel like I'm going in blind because she's given us just enough about it's good or it's good. Whatever.
She's a very clever lady.
Absolutely. She's super smart. And, obviously, as I say, she's been incredibly helpful in getting us along these along this journey and beyond.
Yeah.
So obviously that anybody speculating about what the announcement might be, the word beyond should give you a clue of what it's not, but I'll reiterate later.
Yeah. It's not Star Trek.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, that would just be a weird departure.
That would be a weird shift, but at the same time could be fun.
I'm sure it could be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's really good Star Trek podcasts out there. I just don't know any. I don't know any personally, but
no, it's not something I listen to actually.
No. I might, and I've listened to a Battlestar Galactica podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Battlestar Galacticast. It's good.
Okay.
It's got Mark Bernard and what's her name? Oh my god!
I did a couple of gigs with a band called Battlestar Galactica.
That's pretty cool. I had one of their T-shirts once, I think.
Oh, we did fun band.
Bright green one. What is her name? Caprica 6. What's her name? Oh man, this is going to drive me. I'm going to have to look it up because this is going to drive me out the wall otherwise.
Is it Lucy Lawless?
No, it's not.
Mrs. Pooh.
It's not Mrs. Pooh. Tricia Helfer. There we go.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. So she plays number 6 on Battlestar Galactica, who's the sort of the Cylon who's on all the marketing stuff.
Okay,
the blonde one. But yeah, there's a podcast with her and Mark Bernard where they go and actually they talk about each episode, but they also interview people from the cast. They go to fan conventions and get interviews with people who are on the show. They get if they've got an actor who's free, who's actually on the episode, then they'll bring them. They'll try and sort of call people in to actually guest on the show for the episodes they feature in heavily and stuff like that. It's just very, very cool. It's a nice mix of fan show and behind the scenes. Because it's not an official production, but it's got all the kind of good stuff about official productions in that it's got the actual actors and, the kind of behind the scenes gossip from the people who are actually on the show, like Tricia Helfer. They've had Katie Sackhoff on there. She has the Star Wars connection. So, yeah, I mean, I've never listened to a Star Trek one. I'm sure there are great Star Trek podcasts out there. I've just never personally listened to any. And
a lot of fan audio dramas.
That makes sense. Yeah,
I've heard a couple have been really good.
Yeah, I can believe it, to be honest. That does sound like it's a good fit for Trek. But anyway, yeah, Vesuvi, to reiterate, to kind of recap, thank you immeasurably. We are in your debt eternally for your service to keeping Talk Star Wars with stuff to talk about in the slower weeks. You know, especially in the run up to Rise of Skywalker, that news cycle was an absolute, you know, it was a dripping tap at best. And then we had a couple of weeks for the film, and then it went quiet again.
Yep.
And obviously, we've got Disney Plus to look forward to in a couple of weeks, or a few weeks. I haven't had this confirmed, incidentally, on the subject of Disney Plus. I've heard rumblings that The Mandalorian will be released weekly, same as it was in the States.
I was hoping it was going to be released quite strongly.
Oh, I mean, hey, nice. He's here a week.
Professional.
Which is weird that he's here a week because I won't be on the call after we're finished. Strong. Yeah. Oh, he can't be stopped.
No, seriously, they've tried. He can't. Please stop.
There are rules in place. I don't know how I know who drew his contract up, but it's ironclad. He cannot be stopped. So, yeah, I've heard rumblings that the Disney Plus release will be weekly in the same way as it was in the States and Canada.
Right.
I'm okay with that, to be honest. Yeah. Obviously, it would be nice to have the choice to be able to binge it, but at the same time, I've noticed how much people enjoyed the weekly kind of thing of it, and you know, so I'm not dreading it.
Okay,
you know,
cool.
I'm okay with the notion of it being done. If that's how it ends up being, like I say, it's only hearsay I've had so far. I've not had any. Yeah. I've not seen any official sources that said this is how it's going to work or anything like that. I've just heard rumblings and hearsay about this is kind of the rumor of how it's going to be delivered. And people, let's say, some people are kind of less than happy about it. Me personally, I think it's fine. I think it's going to be okay either way. No, exactly. I mean, it's not like I get a huge amount of TV time every week anyway. So a weekly half-hour show is fine by me. That's easily achievable. Yep. You know, I can easily keep up to date with that rather than something where it's binged and then suddenly everybody's like, "What do you think? What do you think?" I have stuff to do. You know, like this. This is what we're doing right now. You know, that ain't free. Well, it is free, but you know what I mean. So our next message comes from Michael in Sydney. And Michael writes, "Congratulations on the big 200, Rob and Brads. Thank you for everything you do to make this the greatest Star Wars podcast of all time. Also, a thank you to all previous hosts, listeners, contributors, partners, and friends. All the best for the show and future episodes. Regards, Michael from Sydney."
Very kind of you.
That's very kind indeed. Not enough is made of supportive partners, I think. So I think we should call out our supportive other halves for being willing to let us kind of to allow us to do this stuff, because it's not, you know, without going too deep into the logistics of recording this, it's not without imposition for me to record where I am. Obviously, you've been in my house. Some of the patrons have had a tour of it, I think, once as like a live stream where I just basically walk around the flat. Just kind of going.
Episode of Through the Keyhole ever.
It was very, very rough cut through the keyhole footage. No
one got it though.
No, it was very niche. It was very good in that respect. It was like through the hipster keyhole. It's very strange, but you know, it's not without imposition for me to be in a position to record this right now. So you know, if my wife wasn't supportive, then it would be significantly harder, and I feel like the quality would suffer. So you know, it's worth saying they are very supportive of our endeavours.
I would say, for the benefit of our non-British listeners, Through the Keyhole was a game show in the mid-90s in which Lloyd Grossman, who used to be a culinary TV show host, would break into celebrities' houses and try and sneak around and work out who lived there.
Yeah, and he was Canadian, right? Still is, probably.
I thought he was American.
Was he? Oh. He was from the continent of North America, for damn sure.
He was born in Massachusetts but claimed dual citizenship.
Oh, fair enough. With where, though?
England. He's American.
England
British.
and America. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought for some reason I'd got it into my head that he was Canadian. I don't know why. It wasn't like he was exceptionally polite or anything. You know, he wasn't rude. Certainly when he was here doing the recording, he was, you know, nothing but a gentleman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, there you go. Like I say, we should kind of make a point of, in fact, there's also worth pointing out, we should call out, you know, we should shout out to previous hosts as well. So thank you to Mark, obviously Mark, for kind of getting the ball rolling on this show and allowing me to kind of keep the ball rolling in my own way. Steve, Paul, Jeremy, Rob Cast, Carlos, Andy Smith, people like Adam Sheldon who've written in and sent in voicemails, Matt Salvatore, and everybody who's made this show enjoyable, and and things like this is going to be one of those shows that like a few episodes ago we did a big it was like some real talk in amongst. Yeah. I feel like this is going to be one of those shows because there's going to be a lot of asides about the process.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not easy. Like there are times where, like I say, it's a slow news week or something. Like when certainly when The Last Jedi came out, it was quite difficult for me to kind of. I was quite happy to put my opinion out there. I was getting a lot of response, and it can get on top of you sometimes. But what was really great was it's always been a very supportive listener community. They've always been really good at kind of reaching out when they like stuff. I mean, people like Dan Thorpe who'll message first thing on a Saturday morning when he's listening. Yeah. He's downloaded the show as soon as it's available and he's listened to it in full. It's that sort of dedication and that sort of enthusiasm is really heartwarming, and it makes those days where things are tougher and things are harder to countenance that much more bearable. And it makes you that much more likely to go, you know what, I can, whatever this problem is, whatever this issue is that's kind of knocked me for six, I can get through it because people are behind me. And actually, if there's one thing I've learned, certainly in the last kind of couple of months for sure, it's that, if anything, my big worry in the past has been, what are people going to say? And what I've learned is I shouldn't stress it, because the TSW community in particular, and I mean the E14 community in general, but particularly the TSW stuff, because that's obviously where we are right now, has always felt like it's behind me. And that's really good. Well, it's not like where you feel like that about your best years. That's bad. Yeah. When you feel like they're behind you, that's not good. Like,
yeah, I'm always behind you.
Yeah, exactly. And
sometimes that's shoving you quite hard.
Yeah, and into a path of an oncoming train. That's that was off air, but
crazy.
Yeah, well, yeah. Legal disclaimers. Brad has never pushed me in front of a train that I remember. Leave that hanging. But yeah, like I say, Michael, thank you for kind of calling attention to this, because it is one of those things that's very easy to understate and very easy to kind of underserve. But any podcast, regardless of Talk Star Wars or the other Emotionally 14 stuff, the E14 endorsed stuff, everything out there in the world lives and dies on its listeners. If your community's not engaged and they don't give a monkeys, you're done. You might as well just shout into a vacuum. And there are, if I could figure out a facility to turn that into energy, I could solve so many problems with the world. But the listeners make or break a show, and I've just been, I've been on this show for 187 episodes. I've missed a couple, but generally speaking, I've been on since episode, I think, 13. And I've always been struck by how warm and how... What's the word? Yeah. Claggy. No. How warm and encouraging and supportive the TSW community is. I genuinely believe we have some of the best fans in the world.
Yeah.
And around the world. Obviously, we've charted in random countries some weeks, and that's been great.
I think the people of Uganda would be offended by that.
I think that's fair, but at the same time, deal with it. I can't, from the point of view of where we are, that is a weird country to chart in. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm happy we did, and I'm thrilled that they're listening, but it is weird to me. And some of those things always strike me as strange.
A Ugandan podcast charting in Romford for no reason.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, but then at the same time, now I'm really desperate to go and find Ugandan podcasts and try and get them as far as I can. But like I say, Michael, thank you for drawing attention to that, because that is the kind of thing that I should be. It's the kind of thing ultimately that I should be saying on a more regular basis. But this seems like as good an occasion as any to just reiterate that gratitude. Yeah. So the next bit, I warn you, is lengthy, if you catch my drift. Mm-hmm. It is not short, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
It is long, if you get where I'm coming from.
Bloody hell, it really is.
Yeah.
So can't show up now, apparently.
Absolutely not. But I mean, I was given the option to trim it, and I've chosen not to do that.
Yeah, so it's not a part you want to trim, is it?
No, absolutely not. It's very, to me, it strikes me as quite sensitive. So I'm going to go ahead and treat it with the reverence I feel it deserves. So this is from D, obviously famous for last week's Obi-Wan Kenobi death phantasmagoria.
Yes.
And D writes, "Hello there.
All right.
Congratulations on reaching a 200th episode, guys. Here's hoping for at least 200 more." It'll take us a while.
I mean, that's optimistic. Yeah, well, it's only another 4 years, isn't it?
No, exactly, yeah.
We'll have another Star Wars movie by then.
Hopefully. Or just more TV. I'm all right with that.
Yeah.
Thanks for reading my email last week. I got such a great kick out of hearing you both discussing it that I've been playing it repeatedly for myself and anyone in earshot. Nice.
Well, I'm pleased with this D repeatedly.
I'm pleased we could put your... how best to put this? I'm pleased we could be there for you, D.
Yeah.
This week I'm writing to you with some of my observations on the sequel trilogy. I apologise in advance if this is long and unwieldy. Oh my. Mm-hmm. And if it all seems a bit scattershot. I shall double my efforts to make this somewhat coherent. Years back, I remember hearing George Lucas speak about the prequel films and how they connect with the original films through repeated patterns, phrases, and storytelling beats that echo over both trilogies.
True.
As someone who rewatches these films about once a year, picking up on these details is something which I always find satisfying. I love that they continued the tradition on the sequel trilogy, so that now we have a trilogy of trilogies interconnected through these repeated beats and patterns. Mm-hmm. Many of these echoing motifs originate in Akira Kurosawa's film, The Hidden Fortress, which starts with two peasants walking through a wasteland, one telling the other, "This is all your fault." They wind up helping a strong-willed princess. Yeah. That would be very jarring if it wasn't. Yeah. if it wasn't that. Mm-hmm. They wind up helping a strong-willed princess and a general escape from an enemy pursuit. All the while, the peasants are solely interested in getting the princess's gold. This all lends inspiration for C-3PO, R2-D2, Princess Leia, General Kenobi, and Han Solo. The film even includes a fake death via a decoy who is beheaded in place of the princess. He had to work one in, didn't he? Mm-hmm. There is a scene where three of the protagonists are tied to poles, much like Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme in Attack of the Clones. Mm-hmm. An antagonist is left with a grisly slanted scar across his face for the shame of surviving his defeat in a duel. Mm-hmm. This inspires Darth Vader, who survives scarred and mutilated after his defeat on Mustafar, but it also serves to inspire the scar placed in the exact same spot on Kylo Ren's face in The Force Awakens. And then in a different spot in Last Jedi, but that's another story. Yeah. That was just me on the side there, being a tool. Kurosawa's samurai films had previously been remade as westerns.
Can I say the best reference to Hidden Fortress is in A New Hope, and it's absolutely hiding in plain sight as well. It's General Tag says, "Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels."
Hidden Fortress.
But he gets cut off just before he says fortress. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good point. I had never picked up on that, but that's a really good point. Kurosawa's samurai films have previously been remade as westerns. His Yojimbo and Seven Samurai were turned into A Fistful of Dollars and The Magnificent Seven, respectively. Mm-hmm. So I love that Star Wars has a bit of the samurai and the cowboy already baked into its lore. The Mandalorian feels like the apex of this mix, a cross between Leone's The Man with No Name and Lone Wolf and Cub, with even another Kurosawa homage thrown in the middle. Mm-hmm. As an aside, I found
some of the expanded universe novels actually tried to go down that road and did like Star Wars takes on other stories as well. There was one called Shatterpoint, which was Mace Windu in the Clone Wars story. It's Apocalypse Now in the Star Wars universe.
Oh, okay.
And you go back, it's Apocalypse Now, but with lightsabers and monsters. It's great. I love it when Star Wars kind of draws parallels to other stories.
Yeah.
Like that.
I do. That's the thing. I like it in similar way, like the Red Harvest. That series is a nice little take on. It's basically zombie fiction, but it's Star Wars tinged, and I like that because it was it was a familiar genre, and by that point it was very familiar. Zombies were really kind of
having a bit of a resurgence.
I mean, it's fair to say, I think, without even it being a pun, that they just would not die.
No, they got really big for a brief period there. Kind of Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, Shaun of the Dead.
Kicked it all off. Then you have a remake of Dawn of the Dead.
28 Days Later.
So many cheap supermarket zombie movies as well. You know, you can only buy at Tesco.
Yeah, but hang on, just to be clear, cheap supermarket zombie movies or movies about cheap supermarket zombies?
No, now one of those I would watch. I
think it's fair to say one you would watch willingly, and one your dad would put on for us to watch at his house.
I mean, Flight of the Living Dead might be the worst one I saw.
That was pretty bad.
On a plane.
Yeah, I think I saw that one.
Yeah, Black Sheep, maybe that's pretty bad.
Yeah, but that seemed like it was kind of a slightly deliberate. It
kind of Dead Snow was probably the last one of that particular resurgence, and that I really like Dead Snow. It's easily one of my favourite films.
Yeah, incidentally, one of my favourite things about Dead Snow is that Dead Snow 2 had the tagline, "The sequel you did not see coming."
Yeah,
it's like you are so close. Yeah. You are so close and yet so far from the old. You know, all you needed was like you overthought it, and this is me talking. Like,
have you seen Dead Snow?
I haven't, no.
No, there's one bit in it which just makes me think of like one of our gaming nights.
Okay.
They're in a shack and the zombies are outside and they make up a Molotov cocktail.
Right.
And all he's got to do is throw the Molotov cocktail through the window at the zombies.
Sure.
You know that bit in Futurama where Fry goes to launch the rocket with the garbage on it and just completely misses the button with his finger?
Yes.
It's like that. He just throws the Molotov cocktail and it hits the wall next to the window and everything bursts into flame.
Oh, okay.
And it's like us playing Zombie Plague or Arkham Horror or something
very
like
much
that.
like us playing games. In fact, isn't that us playing? Have they just nicked our stuff? They've just taken our stick.
It feels like, man. Yeah. No, Dead Snow 2's weird, but still quite fun. The first one, I think, is really solid.
Yeah. Incidentally, as an aside, Dee calls out the fact that obviously the Mandalorian's got a little bit of samurai, a little bit of cowboy in it. I remember it was a blue check mark on Twitter. I can't remember the person's name, and maybe that's for the best. I don't want them to get dogpiled on my account, certainly, because I don't want them to get any attention at all, because they're quite, I found them quite stupid.
Yeah.
But they were saying
not naming any names, and it rhymes with Odin Paswald.
It was not Odin Paswald. No, but there was somebody who was saying that there was no influence. Like they couldn't see any influence of westerns. I was like, are you watching it with your eyes shut? And your ears shut. Are you watching it?
Yeah.
Is that the problem? You're just not watching it.
What westerns are you? Is it Million Ways to Die in the West? Is that the only western you've seen?
Is it Cowboys and Aliens? Is that your is that your entire experience of the western oeuvre?
Do you have any favourite westerns, Rob?
Oh, do you know? I don't know that I do. I've never been a big Western person. I like the archetype, that kind of, you know, the hero sort of the lone gunman kind of things like that.
Yeah.
I think the closest, and this is going to sound like a really weird film to use as an example, is something like Man on Fire, that Denzel movie. It's kind of the closest I've done to a Western. Because it's got that same kind of one man against everybody kind of aesthetic to it. And I say I would very much be up for a Western in terms of like there's never been any kind of reluctance to watch one. So I mean, I'd be grateful for a steer if you have. Obviously, not a Western pun. I'll play it. I'll play it. But
it's not a field I know a lot about. But the ones I like, I really like.
Such as.
High Plains Drifter is a favourite of mine, which is about it's a Clint Eastwood movie about a guy who turns up in a town, investigate, and the previous sheriff has died under mysterious circumstances.
Okay.
And it's one of those, I can't tell you too much about it.
Sure.
Because every part of the mystery of it is just wrapped in from the opening credits onwards.
Gotcha.
It's a High Plains Drifter. Is superb. Again, Unforgiven is another great.
I thought Unforgiven might come up, so I've heard nothing but good things about that one.
Yeah.
And that's relatively, in the scheme of Westerns, it's relatively new, right? It's not like it's not a super old one. It's like 90.
Late 90s, I think. Yeah.
It's like 90. I feel like it's 93.
Maybe. Yeah, the 90s, for sure.
Because this is a weird kind of.
There was an older man in it.
Yeah, it's a weird reason that my brain has connected up the dots. But I remember it was my first trip to Lakeside Shopping Centre.
Yeah.
And my dad bought Unforgiven on video. And I bought WWE's Year in Review 1993. So it must have been early 94, I would guess.
Nice.
It's fair to say.
The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is great because it's John Wayne and James Stewart as well. James Stewart's just one of those lovely actors. I could happily watch do anything.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, there's some of the kiddie stuff as well. Like High Noon is just a fun kids movie.
Yeah.
It's one of those. There's a few I like, but the ones I like, I do really like. I quite enjoy the remake of True Grit, actually.
Okay, I've heard good things about that.
Yeah, that was very good.
And in terms of samurai films, the closest I think I've got is Ichi the Killer, which is not in the least bit a samurai film, really.
Not a samurai film. It's a superhero film, if you're going to make any kind of grand leap. Yeah, Seven Samurai is superb. If you get the chance, if you need to set aside an afternoon for it, because it's a long old film.
Okay.
But, I think it's 3.5 hours.
1 hour for each samurai.
Yeah, it's something like 3.5 hours long. I'm not a fan of Magnificent Seven remake, because I think it was almost like the start of that American sensibility of, I don't want to go read no movie. Why can't you just go make something about cowboys? I'll watch that instead.
Right, okay.
As you can tell from his accent, he's from everywhere.
Yeah, he's from Essex.
Yeah, he was from Austin, Missouri.
Yeah.
We are I think Bug's Life is a better remake, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, the Magnificent Seven Samurai is very good. Yeah, Lone Wolf and Cub. There's kind of a bowdlerized or bastardized version of it called Shogun Assassin.
Okay.
Which, because Lone Wolf and Cub, I think it was like 10, 12 movies in the end, and the American cut is just hacks together all the fighting sequences and then try and stitch a new film together.
Oh, like Power Rangers.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cut and shut of a movie, but yeah, some fun goofy bits in it.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. D continues. One could say that they took the concept of repeated beats and echoing motifs to an exaggerated degree in The Force Awakens, which feels like a barely concealed remake of A New Hope, which is itself a sort of remake. In stark contrast to The Force Awakens, I've heard people suggest that The Last Jedi brings a lot of new and original ideas to the Star Wars universe. But is that actually the case? When I watch The Last Jedi, all I see is a remake of The Empire Strikes Back. Intriguing. Lest anyone think, none of this is meant as a criticism of Rian Johnson of The Last Jedi.
Everyone has to say this whenever The Last Jedi is mentioned.
It's weird, isn't it?
A massive formal apology to anybody who might be offended if I have a different opinion of Last Jedi, Rian Johnson.
Yeah.
And this isn't aimed at D, but
I know why he's doing it.
I just hate that it has to be done.
Yeah, it is. It's a sad state of... Obviously, we touched on the fact that
we're waiting to be dogpiled whenever we mention Last Jedi.
Yeah, well, I mean, from the experience of being the person in Talk Star Wars who didn't like it when it came out, I can understand that sentiment. It's like that vague apprehension of like, well, we got a new email, right? It's going to be, what have I done now?
Yeah,
I know what you mean. It is sad that it's got to the stage where you can't just say, like I say, to the point where I've said, about The Rise of Skywalker, I liked it, but I didn't love it. And that's apparently being really down on the film. It's like, did you miss the bit where I said I liked it? Anyway.
Yeah.
But, it's that kind of, I understand why D has to preface with it. It's sad that he has to. But
Sorry,
I digress. But we digress.
I don't mean to keep cutting off your D.
No, that's fine. Anyway, so none of this is meant as a criticism of Rian Johnson of The Last Jedi. The echoed beats remake aspect of the film is actually something that I love about it. Rian Johnson hid the remake by occasionally making a storytelling decision that turns right instead of left, and he frequently reverses things that J.J. Abrams' film had previously set in place.
Didn't notice that.
Those reversals were seen as slights against Abrams' film, but having reversals to the setups of the previous film is very much on track with The Empire Strikes Back's relationship to A New Hope. Ryan even takes the principal narrative device of Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, that of a story told from 3 different perspectives, and uses it to explain the backstory between Luke and Kylo Ren. This is 2 birds with 1 stone, cribbing from Lucas by cribbing from Kurosawa. Cribbing? Okay. I've never heard cribbing as a verb in that context. Really? No, it's cool.
Yeah.
I quite like it. Yeah. I suppose that's why it's called cribbage, right? Is that a similar thing?
One is to kind of take basic notes of something and copy it, and another is a card game. So
yeah.
I'm going to say no.
Okay,
in
fine.
The same way that cribbage is related to cabbage in much the same way.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. Did you hit your head before we started recording out of interest?
No, why?
No reason.
Cool. Here now, then, is a list of the echoed beats, mirroring and reversals that I noticed while watching The Last Jedi.
Cool.
A New Hope ends with the rebels being victorious by destroying the Death Star. In a reversal to that victory, The Empire Strikes Back begins during a dark time for the rebellion, with the rebels being pursued by the Empire and forced to evacuate their base on Hoth.
Yep.
Fair? The Force Awakens ends with the Resistance being victorious by destroying Starkiller Base. In a reversal to that victory, The Last Jedi begins soon after, with the Resistance being pursued by the First Order and forced to evacuate their base on Dakar.
Mm-hmm.
There is a certain question of timings, I feel. My recollection is that Empire takes place about a year to 18 months after A New Hope.
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Whereas Force Awakens and Last Jedi happen pretty much hours apart. Like,
if that, I think it's a direct follow-on. Yeah. I hope it's not hours, because that's awkward as hell for Luke and Rey.
There is that, yeah.
Let's say instantaneous. Otherwise, Luke's just going to be looking at her going, "I've got stuff to do with you.
Can I help you?" And she just stood there, frozen in place, looking all moody.
Who talks first? You talk first. I talk first.
That was what a lot of people were speculating that might begin with.
Really?
And we were all like, "Yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah. That's all right. Quite like that." And then in the end, what we got was not that. Empire begins with a rebel base attacked on the snow world of Hoth by walkers. Last Jedi ends with a resistance base being attacked on the salt world of Crate by walkers. They even point the salt out as an awkward, humorous aside, but perhaps also to differentiate it from snow and distract from people making the outright connection that this is another Hoth, the same as Jakku is another Tatooine. Yeah, fair. Incidentally, I love that Crate was a salt world, because it's led to so many wonderful memes. Because, there's certain subreddits where you can go and just see memes, and some of them are just things like somebody with an opinion, and then underneath it's just somebody going, "Salt." I like it. Early on in Empire...
I want to know how that guy lasted in the Rebel Alliance for so long, if his first instinct is to lick every planet he gets to.
He starts with, right, bring Jimmy in to get the lick test out of the way. Oh, that guy.
Why is that?
I hate that guy.
Why is that a thing you do?
Yeah. It just reminds me, it just makes me think of...
About to die of this battle, bit of taste for planet a bit first, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Mel Brooks in Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it's not Mel Brooks. It's... what's his name? He's walking through... He plays the Abbot, and he's walking through... He's walking through the procession, and everybody's like... "Hello, greetings, Abbot, blessings, Abbot," and he's like, "Hey, Abbot." And he's like, "I hate that guy." Just imagine, he goes down, licks the soil, and somebody just turns around and goes, "I hate that guy." It's like, just, because if he cuts himself or something like that, Muggins is going to have to patch him up. And I just don't have the time. I don't have the interest. Just forget him. Just leave him to it. Anyway, early on in Empire, Luke is being given medical treatment in a Bacta tank.
Yes.
Early on in Last Jedi, the traitor FN-2187 is being given medical treatment in a Flex Poly Bacta suit.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
Luke is trained on Dagobah by Yoda, who is momentarily reluctant to train the young Skywalker, but Force Ghost Obi-Wan quickly changes Yoda's mind.
Correct.
Rey is not trained on Ahch-To by Luke initially, who is completely against training the young Palpatine, and at best tickles her with a feather. Force Ghost Yoda changes Luke's mind only after Rey has already left. While on Dagobah, Luke has a Force vision that foreshadows the truth about his father and Luke's potential fate should he go to the dark side. Then he leaves before his training is complete and fails. While on Ahch-To, Rey has a Force vision of mirror images of herself surrounded by nothing and no one else, revealing her greatest fear about herself, that she is forever all alone, comes from nothing, and is nothing. Then she leaves completely untrained and succeeds. Any thoughts on that one? I mean, I don't disagree. It's, not in terms of just in terms of any kind of further comment or.
I'm just rereading it. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Force vision foreshadows it fails. Yes. While on that tower, Rey's a Force vision herself trained by nothing and no one else, really no grace for
yeah.
Does she succeed?
I mean, in terms of what? Does she succeed in...
That's my question.
In Star Wars?
Well,
no. Arguably.
Where does she go from Ahch-To? She goes to...
Try and convince Kylo to kill Snoke. Well, she tries to convince Kylo to join up with her and take on Snoke.
Which she only does temporarily.
Yeah. Which,
I think you could call it a partial victory.
Mixed success.
Mixed success, yeah.
She does, by the end of the film, manage to do more with the Force than Luke has done by this point, even though he's had weeks and weeks of instruction. But, retconned family lineage.
I don't know. I feel like some of it is, if you're talking about like her fighting skill and stuff like that, that's
that stuff I've never had a problem with.
That's more like modern to like 80s cinematography as well. You have to make some allowances for that.
Oh no, that side of things I don't have so much of a problem. It's more the lifting all the rocks thing.
I'm not a fan of that shot. I really am not. It's almost like it's not like even a Beyond Yoda level. If there's a sheer number of rockets, it's almost like a Doctor Strange power level.
Yeah, exactly.
It's I personally am not a fan of that shot.
No, I agree. I think there's already been this. By this point, thinking back a bit, there's already been these questions about like, hang on, how is she managing to do this stuff so easily without even knowing what some of this stuff even involves?
Because she's got a dyad collection to Kylo Ren.
Yeah, but this is like after the fact retconning. This is not like like with Luke, for example, right? With Luke on, like, I don't dispute this.
I don't dispute that.
But with Luke in the first two films, he is at least introduced to the concept of how the Force works and how it should work, and the fact that it's Rey finds out that some stuff she heard that she thought was folktales is true, and instantly can do all of it. Without much in the way of, the novel does a better job of explaining it a bit, but even then it's not much.
If there's one sentence I'd like to ban from all Star Wars discourse, it's the novelization does a better job of portraying it.
It shouldn't have to.
It shouldn't have to be. No. My answer to that is twofold. Firstly, I don't want to criticise the sequel trilogy for after effect retcons when the original trilogy is littered with after effect retcons.
It is, but at the same time, there is at least that whole kind of. For me, there's the argument of you invented it, you get to change it.
Yeah, but to follow that up with my second point, which if you're saying that there's a better sense of character development and pacing in the original trilogy than there is in the sequel trilogy, I would be a madman to argue with you.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate.
No, not actually.
With that said, no, I appreciate the reassurance that I'm not entirely a madman. At least,
no. There's a lot of these. There's a lot of things I love about the sequel trilogy. The sense of which the character development is rushed is not one of them.
Yeah,
but I don't want to sound like a sequel trilogy hater because I'm not.
Well, no, obviously we as always we can caveat with.
It's all
you're allowed to not like a movie.
Yeah.
You're allowed to also just go, I like them all except this one. That's fine.
Yeah.
You're allowed to like one and not like the rest.
Yeah.
How's
that? Unless it's Attack of the Clones, that's just weird.
It's odd. Yeah, that would be a weird choice.
I really, really like
all the movies.
It's really, really like the C-3PO bit in Attack of the Clones. That's really good, man.
Yeah, apart from that,
would be like saying, the only bit of David Bowie I liked was Tin Machine.
Yeah,
that'd be
Tin Machine. And, I can loop for days. The Laughing Gnome.
Yeah.
I can listen to it about 2 or 3 times. That's about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what you mean. I take your point about the retconning being, it's a franchise that's not short of some. Let's say that it's not to
absolutely.
the point. It's not to the point of, I don't know, Doctor Who, where it's like But I mean, Doctor Who's a weird example.
Got to roll with it a bit. I think, as you say, it's part of the series
to a point. Yeah, but I think that me, there's a. I guess the thing, the kind of the way I look at it is. The only reason it's still part of the series is because nobody's trying to do it better, because they've just kind of accepted that they can get away with it almost. I think there's a little bit of complacency there. I think, and
I think that's fair.
We've talked about we can put a limited amount of marketing behind this film. It's Star Wars, people will go and see it. It's like not anymore. Like it's a crowded market for high production value film, TV, books, comics. There's a lot out there, and even something like Star Wars comics, right? Star Wars comics are doing really well in terms of critical acclaim. A lot of people really like the Star Wars comics, but there's a lot of really good indie stuff you can get really easily digitally now. So it's not like it's not like you can't It's not that you're able to just take your foot off the gas. You still have to keep the bar high, especially if you're a multi-billion-dollar franchise licensed property. You have to. There's no excuse for me. Like you can't just write it off as like, oh well, you know. Oh, I don't know.
Talk about yourself again.
While having his Force vision, Luke breaks Vader's mask.
Right.
While having an elevator ride, Kylo Ren breaks his own mask. I mean, these are both facts.
It feels a little tenuous.
That's a bit more of a tenuous link. There's something about one of the things I kind of do like about The Last Jedi is that whole thing of the smashing of the mask. That because it's kind of that teenage tantrum thing mixed with deep down. There's this kind of sense that Snoke's right. You know what I mean? There's that sort of. He's been sort of reprimanded by Snoke about taking the stupid mask off, and you know, I think Snoke picks on him, takes his lunch money, and gives him a wedgie, right? Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Or maybe mixed it up with another film. But he's riding the lift down after having been admonished for sort of playing dress up, basically, and he starts smashing things to pieces, and that's his reaction to it, is to sort of throw a strop, you know. Yeah. And I actually quite liked that as a sort of narrative thing, because he's showing his immaturity, showing that he's not, you know, on the one hand, he's showing that kind of same tendency to anger and tendency to sort of rage out as Anakin, but at the same time, he's also showing that actually he's not as mature as Anakin, and there is that kind of, it's kind of emphasizing that disconnect between Anakin and Kylo.
Yeah.
In terms of where they are and where they think, you know, where Kylo thinks they are, where Kylo thinks he is in development terms versus where Snoke thinks he is. And there's that same kind of sense of they're not aligned, and you see it quite plainly in that particular scene.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I do quite like about that film. Obviously, beyond the talk we've already had about things like the visuals being especially impressive and things along those lines. In The Empire Strikes Back, the Millennium Falcon is being pursued by the Empire in one exciting sequence after another. In The Last Jedi, the Resistance are being pursued nonchalantly by the New Order. First Order, I'm guessing, is it'd be a very different film if they're being pursued by New Order. Although I'd watch it still, because you know I keep the true faith. Are being pursued nonchalantly by the First Order in one long straight line, waiting for their fuel to run out. For the audience, this takes about 2 hours. For the characters in the film, it might be 3 whole days of the First Order patiently following behind with no other plan. I've never quite understood why the chase makes any sense at all in Star Wars. Yeah. And this is the thing, a lot of people kind of say like, oh, it's wizard in space, you have to let things go. I am fine with that as a general rule, provided that what I'm letting go is not the rules inside that you've established in your own universe. You can't set rules in a universe and then just not follow them and say it's a movie that doesn't make sense. Like, that's only because you haven't tried. Do you know what I mean? Like the chase thing, space is three-dimensional for a start. And then there's the whole question of why don't they just... I mean, there's so much about the space stuff in Last Jedi. It barely even touched the sides compared to some of the stuff that's in the space battles, the space stuff in Last Jedi. I'm not so, there are things I'm more concerned about than that. But yeah, the chase thing has never quite made sense to me. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's the opening shot of A New Hope is just one spaceship chasing another one. But that's a relatively brief chase, it seems to me.
Yeah, and it's not a question of let's wait for their fuel to run out. It's, like you say, it's relatively brief. They're trying to get in tractor beam range, whereas the First Order are trying to get in range of cannons that suddenly have an effective distance. Weird.
Melee.
Yeah, they were kind of trying to get into melee range. They put a scope on their knife, and they just want to make sure they get in properly. Attack of the Clones tells the story of Anakin and Padme's romance. Empire tells the story of Han and Leia's romance. Last Jedi tells the story of Rey and Kylo's romance / anti-romance. I've never seen the romance in Last Jedi. it's I don't want to rag on. I'm not trying to rag on people when I say these things, but I don't see what other people are seeing with the Rey and Kylo romance thing. I just do not see it. The most I've kind of seen is like, you know, here's a kind of an olive branch of like, okay, I see it fine. The kiss at the end of Rise of Skywalker, which, as I've said before, I'm not a fan of. I think it's a really convoluted addition, but what it does what it can convey effectively and credibly is gratitude at saving her life. Because she understands what he's done. Maybe she doesn't understand the implications of it just yet, because I think immediately after that he just lays down and then you never see him again.
Yeah.
But you know, she understands what he's just done for her, and and a kiss to say thank you for that, fine. You know, they've done sillier things to say thank you in films before. So that side of things has never been a big stumbling block for me. The stumbling block for me is the romance notion, that there's anything between them beyond, you know, loathing ultimately and abuse. So it's odd to me that, anyway, in A New Hope, friend and hero Ben Kenobi lies to Luke about his father. This is reversed in The Empire Strikes Back by Darth Vader and straightened out by Yoda in Return of the Jedi. In The Last Jedi, enemy and villain Kylo Ren lies to Rey about her parents. This is straightened out by Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker. Is it a lie if he doesn't know he's lying? I would say on the technicality, it's not a lie. I take his point, and he's correct in so much as Palpatine straightens out makes it, you know, he brings accuracy to the proceedings, but I would say it's fair to say that it's not a lie if you don't know you're not telling the truth. You know, if you're telling the truth as you know it, and it turns out that that's not the case, that doesn't strike me as a lie in the strictest sense. It strikes me as mistaken. But anyway, I digress. In Attack of the Clones, our heroes are betrayed by a shady old former Jedi, Count Dooku, who leaves them at the mercy of the Geonosian separatists. In The Empire Strikes Back, our heroes are betrayed by a shady old friend and gambler, Lando Calrissian, who gives them over to the Empire. In The Last Jedi, our heroes are betrayed by a shady new ally, DJ, a codebreaker they meet on a gambling planet who gives them over to the First Order. I've always felt like DJ needed to do something else. So I've always felt like DJ was, you know, what would have been cool would be to have DJ rig up the ATST to, you know, to sort of abuse its slave circuits or something, do something to just figure some way to kind of make him a bit more. Because the thing I've always found about Last Jedi is everybody talks about it being such a smart, such a deep, such an intelligent movie. But actually all the nuance that they tease at is undone by the end of the film, because it's just a binary good versus evil story by the end. All that all that grey area they talk about, where it's things like, the whole Planet 1% thing is a bit daft, and I've never been a fan.
The most frequent criticism I've heard of Last Jedi, in all honesty, is that, it wasn't what I was expecting. It was almost like a subvertive version.
Yeah, so it's like this whole thing of this notion of like it's a super smart film, and it's not by any means a dumb film, but it's not. I feel like it's a lot of people project intelligence onto it when none exists. This kind of level of depth.
Yeah.
But again, I digress. These are my thoughts, and we're reading these. In Return of the Jedi, Luke goes to Darth Vader, hoping to turn him towards the light side. He is placed in handcuffs and taken to Emperor Palpatine. In Last Jedi, Rey goes to Kylo Ren, hoping to turn him towards the light side. She is placed in handcuffs and taken to Supreme Leader Snoke. Yes, she is. And it's one of the best bits of the film, because the whole thing of him just holding her up and torturing her is really cool. Anyway. In Revenge of the Sith, major villains with little or no backstory, General Grievous and Count Dooku are killed off. In Last Jedi, major villains with no backstory, Supreme Leader Snoke and Captain Phasma are killed off. Phasma is the biggest missed trick in the sequel trilogy. The second biggest. Finn is the biggest. Finn gets a decent amount of screen time and nowhere near enough at the same time. Because John Boyega is an absolute treasure.
Absolutely. I treasure him.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the kind of criticisms of Rise of Skywalker for the lack of Kelly Marie Tran, while founded, especially when you consider that Dominic Monaghan doesn't really need to be there.
No.
is one thing. And like I say, I have some sympathy for that position, but the lack of Finn in the whole trilogy, he has the most interesting story to tell out of all of them.
Yeah. I think I've said before, my main bugbear with Rise of Skywalker, of all the things to have a problem with, was that when they meet the other stormtroopers who've rebelled, they could have said, "Oh, you're FN 2187. There are stories about how you were the first one, to break your programming," and that would almost like echo is the bit from Force Awakens about Luke Skywalker. I thought he was just a myth.
Yeah.
That
he
thing.
becomes like
Instead
a mythological
of
figure.
just going, "Oh yeah, everyone does that, mate."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been known.
Yeah,
that's kind of it.
That will happen. Yeah,
yeah. It's been known as about. I think it's about. I think they consider a 10% fail rate to be effective,
which is average for a Russell Hobbs toaster.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. But Captain Phasma is the second biggest mistrick because it's a cool character. It's visually impressive. It's got the cool aesthetic. It's got the cool... I mean, she's got that awesome voice.
Yeah.
Just that whole, that slightly tinny, sir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just great. It just bleeds kind of sycophancy and everything sort of bleeds through. I mean, Hux starts off well and gets worse for me, but he's not a missed opportunity in the same way those two are.
Yeah.
He's a good, promising character portrayed by a tremendously talented actor who they then go on to make progressively worse for comic effects because everything has to go Marvel now. And that's kind of how it feels to me, is this kind of desperation to go sort of for that Marvel, that Marvel level of humor. And Star Wars doesn't need to do that. And actually a lot of films don't need to do that. Yeah. And that's where I think DC has kind of gone well, is by sort of making it distinct and not having to go down that route just because they can. Now, it's not to say, because I've seen Shazam and that's a cracking film. And that's got some silly jokes and stuff in it, but that fits the tone of this thing because it's about a teenage boy who becomes a big strapping man when he says Shazam. Spoilers. I mean, that's the comic, but not so much the plot of the film, but it's certainly the mechanics. But we digress. In The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi face off against Darth Maul. Maul is cut in half.
Correct.
In The Last Jedi, Rey and Kylo Ren face off against Supreme Leader Snoke. Snoke is cut in half.
A bit more tenuous, but okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, these are facts, but the link between the two, there's probably echoes, but they're fainter. Echoes can be faint, I suppose, so that makes sense. In The Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader asked Luke to join him and rule the galaxy as father and son. In The Last Jedi, Kylo Ren asked Rey to join him and bring a new order to the galaxy.
Yep. Why? Yeah. Not sure, but yeah.
Well, he obviously recognizes she's powerful. It would be nice if there was an effort to kind of make it clear that it's clear that he fears her power because she beats him in one-on-one without really, initially there's a bit of effort, but then largely it's pretty plain sailing. And obviously he's been a little bit injured, but at the same time, it's not necessarily played up on as much as it could have been. But that's that. These boards are well trodden in criticism hall. In The Empire Strikes Back, the Millennium Falcon is unable to use its hyperdrive for most of the film. When it finally does go to hyperspace, the ship flies away from the Imperial ships that have been pursuing it. In The Last Jedi, the Resistance flagship Raddus is unable to use its hyperdrive for most of the film. And when it finally does go to hyperspace, the ship flies towards the First Order ships that have been pursuing it.
Don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, we've trodden this one to death. Droid. My answer is still the same. Droids. You may balk. You may balk at that last one, but at least half of it is true. And it also feels right when you consider how often Rian Johnson takes a story beat and turns it into a different direction, literally in this case. For all the fans who seem to love The Last Jedi for being so different and new, or for those detractors who hated it for being too different and out of step with The Force Awakens, it seems to me that Rian followed directly behind JJ's footsteps by remaking an original trilogy film.
Cool.
The sequel trilogy is a layer cake with the story of Rey, Finn, Poe and Ben on the top. The middle layers are made up of A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and even Return of the Jedi, and the slight silver sliver of crust holding it together is the prequel trilogy. It's an incredibly complex metaphor, but
it really is. Yeah.
Now I'm hungry for cake.
Yeah, Palpatine cake.
Although it's nice that he mentioned cake, because that's something we've touched on as Star Wars is cake.
I've often touched on cake.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that is the easiest way to eat it. Mm-hmm. In the prequel trilogy, the clone army was bought, paid for, and trained in secret for years before being discovered. They were created by the Sith for Palpatine's eventual takeover of the galaxy. The clones were his weapons of mass destruction used to wipe out the Jedi.
Correct.
In the sequel trilogy, the First Order, and in particular the Sith Eternal, were amassed and trained in secret for Palpatine's planned takeover of the galaxy. The Sith Eternal man a fleet of Sith Star Destroyers intent on wiping out the Resistance. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And, you know, the only thing is, it would be nice... Again, this is one of those things, novelization of Force Awakens makes it clear that the First Order is not really known much about. Mm-hmm. They don't really do much, they don't do enough of that in the film.
Yeah.
To make it clear that this has come out, the surprise attack has come out of literally nowhere. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like when you watch the film in isolation, it almost feels like they know about the First Order, but they've just been keeping to themselves up until that point.
Yeah.
Whereas actually that's not the case.
Okay.
Anyway. The Phantom Menace in both trilogies, so sequel and prequel and Disney, is Palpatine, revealed at the end to both be the mastermind behind everything. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, I wonder how many of these parallels are actually deliberate and not just coincidental or conjecture on my part. I think it's about 60-40, if you're curious for rough numbers. As an aside, I would love to believe that the sequel trilogy has all been made more or less by design from the start. I would love to believe that too. In hindsight, Rian Johnson actually kept the mystery of Rey's parentage open-ended by dismissing it through Kylo Ren, a villain, an unreliable narrator, who takes advantage of Rey's greatest fear by telling her that she comes from nothing and is nothing except to him, allaying her fear that she will forever be all alone. Earlier in the film, Luke is aghast to discover that Rey is so quick to reach for the dark side. At the time, I took it as a failing on her part due to lack of training and inexperience with the Force. But in retrospect, it feels like Rian was seeding the revelation of her heritage, which would eventually pay off in the rise of Skywalker. I also heard that the Palpatine lineage was a Kathleen Kennedy idea, and that the Death Star 2 ruins were even a potential story location as far back as Force Awakens. So this would lend to the idea that Rian and JJ were working on a unified front under Kathleen Kennedy's guidance to tell the story with at least some rough framework in mind, and that is it not a case of both directors at odds trying to undo each other's work. Whatever the truth is, I've had fun putting this together for you, and as always, look forward to your comments. Best of luck to you both, D. I would love to believe, in a similar way, that the sequel trilogy was one unified effort, one endeavor throughout, but I find it hard to believe given what I've seen. It's, to me, it strikes that the sequel trilogy, the Disney trilogy, is desperate for a cohesive vision all the way through.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like it has one at all. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a shame because I feel like, I mean, that's one thing you can say, right, about the MCU. Now, I realize that the Marvel comparison is quite an easy one, but the Marvel films are all directed by different people. There are a few common directors, but for the most part, there are a large number of them that are directed by different people.
Yeah.
So there's Taika, there's Jon Favreau, there's the Russo brothers, there's who is it who does Doctor Strange? I can't think.
Sure, we can't.
Sure. Then there's Ryan Coogler, is it, the Black Panther?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And so, but they've all got this connective tissue, and it's very clear, especially when you watch things like the after credit sequences, that they're thinking about the bigger picture as they're going along. Mm-hmm. Because they've got things like at the end of Ant-Man, there's a scene from Civil War that ends up being in Civil War verbatim. Mm-hmm. It's pretty clear that those things have been recorded with a mind to being used in films that are being filmed at the same time or shortly afterwards.
Yeah.
So these things are being seeded and being
incredibly well.
Yeah, exactly. It's maybe it is just that with the Marvel, the MCU threading being so well done, it's hard to top it. Maybe it just sets an unrealistic expectation of unified things. But I really feel like I don't feel like the Disney trilogy has that.
No, really.
And there's not to say there's not stuff to like about it, because there really is, but it doesn't feel to me like a unified. It feels like three films done by two different people that just happen to be numbered sequentially.
Yep.
And I can only, in a way, even though I was very opposed to how Colin Trevorrow was kind of ejected, I'm actually kind of relieved because that might have been made it worse.
Yeah.
3 directors with 3 completely different visions, all kind of vying for a place at the table, might have been a disaster area.
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure, you know, but there you go. So, D, yes, it was a long message, but it was a good one. Yeah, it was a good one. It was well thought out. We got through it. But yeah, it's you know, like I say, it's there's a lot to like in there. There's a lot to think about. Obviously, listeners are welcome to message in with their thoughts and comments and stuff. And there's not much more to say about it than that. So that's the last of our messages this week. So I think it's probably best that we just kind of talk about what's next, right?
Sure. Let's kick this pig.
So this, I'm going to say up front before I start talking, because I'm going to do this a little bit seat in my pants and fly by night, because I often find that that's the best way for me to articulate stuff, because I have the space to unpack here. You know, I can elucidate thoughts as they occur to me, and it means I don't have to worry about, oh, I missed something, because if it didn't occur to me, it can't be that important, you know? So it's probably not escaped the notice of people who have been listening for some time that the news cycle in and around The Rise of Skywalker has been hard going, in terms of there's been a lot of very slow weeks. We've been lucky in the sense that we've had excellent people writing excellent stuff in to keep us talking. And you and I have known each other for long enough that we can generally riff. But there comes a point in my mind where that will be more difficult to sustain. And it will be, you know, and it won't be fair on listeners in terms of, you know, I put a lot of pride in what we produce and what we output, and you know, and production of high quality output is something I take very seriously and always have. It's one of the reasons I've always kind of, you know, I considered myself to have big shoes to fill when it came to being the host and being the kind of the motivating force, if you will, with Talk Star Wars when Mark stepped aside. So, like I said, I want to get something off out of there up front. What I'm not about to do is say there are going to be no more Talk Star Wars, because that's not true. What I am going to say is that we are going to be taking a break while we rethink the format. And I have an idea of provisionally what format it's going to take, but I want to take some time to scope it out a bit, keep the focus tight, make it, you know, more, a little bit more thought out ahead of time, and not be so news heavy. So, like I say, because we've had to rely on the news cycle being populous and it isn't, it's made it harder. And I don't want that to persist, and I don't want that to be a thing that keeps going. So what I'm saying for now, and I will kind of make a point of updating people using this feed, because obviously we have it to use, when we're closer to clarity, when we have more of an idea of what it's going to be, when things are going to start going again. I have a provisional date in my mind, which I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm looking increasingly lustily at March 30th. And there are reasons behind that, which will become more apparent as I get closer to announcing what the next play is going to be. What I will say for sure, there won't be. So we've hit 200, and this is one of the reasons that this conversation, this announcement's happening now, is because I wanted to get to 200 before we changed anything, because it seemed mad to me to get to 197 and go, we're going to a new format, which means there's no more numbers. What a weird way to do it. You know what I mean? So there's a reason I've waited until 200. This has been kind of in my head for some time, and as Brad and I were discussing off air before we started, I'm an overthinker. So it's easy for me to agonize over how best to deliver stuff and how best to present things and how best to restructure. So what I'm doing is now trying to take advantage of the fact that, as I mentioned at the top of the show, the listeners have always been, and that's you, obviously I'm talking to now, have always been very supportive when stuff happens. So when, for example, we have a sickness for a week, or one of us is on holiday, or one of us just can't record, I expect there to be a kind of, oh man, and there is disappointment, but at the same time, it's always like, oh, well, take a week off. It's not the end of the world. And so I don't have any problem believing that this will, I have no doubt for one thing, believing that this will not surprise some people who've been listening to the show for some time. Obviously, some people will have no doubt noticed that some weeks are easier than others to get conversation going and a lot of that depends on the questions coming in, but it shouldn't be to the listeners to prop the entire operation up. It should be, it should be a process that we can all kind of enjoy together. So, like I said, what I'm kind of announcing right now is that we're going to take a step back temporarily, very temporarily. So like I said, I want to make this clear. This is not we're not phasing this out. We're not going, we'll be back soon and then never coming back. March 30th is the date that I've got in my head as the day it's coming. And that will be like Talk Star Wars V2. And like I said, I'll be using this feed to update people as we get more figured out in terms of what form everything's going to take, how it's going to work, ways for people to get involved, because I'm sure that, I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm pretty convinced there will be ways for people to get involved, because that makes sense, right? So, yeah, Talk Star Wars has hit 200. This is the thing this is something I cared about very deeply. Now that we've done that, it's time, I think, and I think this is something that you're going to start, I firmly believe you're going to start seeing this from a lot of outfits over the course of the next 12 months. Adapt or stop. And what I'm saying is we're going to adapt. So, that's that's the gist of it. Obviously, like I said, it's a bit tricky to to talk too much about it without having a clear idea of what that's going to be and what form it's going to take and how much I want to say about it now. But rest assured, I have an idea already of where it starts. And from there, we can figure the rest out. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I'm just along for the ride, man.
Okay, well, that's good. So, listeners, one thing I'm going to open up right now is I'm going to open up the floor to the listeners as well, to kind of, as I've kind of always been, I think, pretty good at this, but I want to make sure I'm crystal clear. There will be questions about this stuff, not least of all from the regular listeners, the regular contributors. You are going to have questions. I understand that. Like I say, you're going to have concerns. I am my door is always open, proverbially speaking, digitally speaking.
Yeah.
So podcast@emotionally14.com is the place to email to talk about this stuff. And I will engage in dialogue with anybody who is coming at it from the point of view of, I've heard what you said, I have questions. I appreciate that the downside of doing things off the cuff is that sometimes I'm not in the least bit clear. And obviously then people will hear it and go, well, I'm sure he knows what he meant to say, but I'm not quite convinced. So, or I'm, like I say, I'm unclear, I'm confused. But like I said, there's a couple of things I want to get off my chest and get off the bat right away. This is not a precursor to an announcement of cancellation. This is we're going to figure out what form the show takes in the future. And in order to do that, we need some time. And the best way to do that is to take a short hiatus. Like I say, March 30th, mark that in your calendars.
All right, we'll do.
Yeah. You'll need to do it a few days before because we'll have to record it first.
Okay.
But I'll figure it. Well, I'll let you know when it's happening. Don't worry.
Yeah, right,
I'll keep you posted. I'd like to think I always do.
Well, if you still want me back,
Yeah, of course. You know, right. You're a part of whatever form that takes. Don't panic.
Oh, all right. I won't then.
You're not shot on me that easy, sunshine.
No, I know.
So, like I say, I appreciate that there are going to be listeners who might have further questions. They might have comments. I'm fully expecting there to be people who might hear it and be unhappy about this. But all I can assure you is I've given this a lot of thought. I really believe this is the way every outfit is going to have to consider what they do. I think every outfit is going to go through these questions. I like to think I'm ahead of the curve, or maybe they've just done it and just not done it publicly. Yep. So either one is entirely possible, and let's be fair, you know, equally probable. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I like being honest. I like being upfront about this stuff. I like to think that people will appreciate it. And I like to think that one of the things about Talk Star Wars I've always liked is I've certainly never felt like we've gone into any discussion. What?
For some reason, my brain went, I like being honest, which is why I feel very bad about the cat we killed.
Man, jumping Garth Marenghi Start Place references midway through the. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how our brains work. That's fair.
Yeah.
So, like I say, I always feel like we've been pretty good at being upfront about where we are and you know, letting people know when things are not going to be like things like episodes being missing because we're not well. As soon as we know, other people, we let people know. We don't you don't surprise people with no episode when it's when Monday hits. So, you know, I like to think that we've been plenty upfront with people in the past, and we're going to continue to be so, because I really feel quite strongly that level of honesty and upfront and that little peek behind the curtain is actually, I would like to think, one of the reasons people like us, because we're human. We're not just hyper-produced.
We know about Star Wars. I feel that's the main reason.
I think hopefully that's a part of it. Yes. It's not the biggest part, but hopefully it's a part, certainly an important one. Mm-hmm. But the important thing for me, I don't want to be one of those hyper-produced kind of everything's masked behind the curtain outfits where nothing's on, you know, there's no kind of...
No transparency.
No transparency, no imperfection on the surface. I'm okay with the fact that, you know, like I said, I'm flying by the seat of my pants for talking about this right now, doing this discussion right now. So I know that sometimes has upsides in that I'm more likely to say the stuff that matters, but I'm also more likely to word it in a way that's clunky and hard to follow for people who are kind of listening on their commute or whatever. But the point of it, like I say, the key takeaway from this is for the next, I think it's 6 weeks or thereabouts.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
We're gonna be figuring out what the future of Talk Star Wars looks like, both in the context of the show itself. Maybe there's going to be opportunities to kind of take another look at the integrations with E14 as a whole, all that stuff, right? There's got to be some stuff we're missing, I'm sure. And like I say, there's going to be stuff I'm missing from this description, but I want to reassure people this is not a we're shutting it down kind of discussion. This is it doesn't, like, what we're doing right now doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel quite right. And I think, like I said, I think it's because the news cycle is slow and it's proving difficult to navigate. And I don't see it getting better. Yeah. If anything, I see it getting worse. And, you know, in the UK, we've been hampered by things like we don't get the streaming services at the same time as everybody else. So as a content creator for Star Wars podcasts, that makes things quite difficult to be on top of things unless you want to go down the Yo Heave Ho route, which I don't, because, you know, not least of all because I have plenty of stuff I don't have the time to watch that I actually do pay for. So, you know, the idea of then adding stuff to the mix to just further complicate matters just feels wrong.
Yeah.
So, like I said, if you feel like you want to kind of weigh in on this discussion, obviously the social media stuff is all still there. None of these things are going anywhere. So you can still reach out to us, podcast@emotionally14.com, Twitter @Talk Star Wars, Emotionally14, the Facebook pages. You can message us behind the scenes there. All that stuff is still there and still accessible to you, and none of that's going anywhere. So if you have thoughts on that stuff, or even if you have suggestions on what you'd like the future of Talk Star Wars to look like. That's the kind of stuff that's worth sending in, because we might use it, and we'll give you a shout on the first episode of Talk Star Wars V2. It will be thanks to this, thanks to Person X for coming up with this idea, which we're going to use and shamelessly plagiarise. Got to love Person X. Aren't they good?
This is my favourite Person X.
Absolutely. And it's even lighter than your usual brand of person. I've watched this in Person X, and this in New Daz.
Order of a credit card, and we'll also throw in this Best of the 80s CD.
We just add it. We've just got it lying around. We've got loads of them.
I can't get rid of it. We've messed up the mastering, and it's just 8 copies of Love Walked Into My Heart.
Yeah, fair. I mean, there are worse things from the 80s.
Yeah.
In fact, way worse. I would stop there. So, listeners, thank you for getting us to 200. Like I said, what I will say is there will be no 201, but that's not because there's going to be no more shows. It's because we're going to stop numbering, because it may... Well, maybe we will carry on numbering. It depends on what format it takes. I have some ideas. Like I said, I have some ideas at this stage of what format it looks like, but I need to puzzle it out. And I need to sort of take a look at how sustainable it is in the future. So what I'm going to say, like I said, in the meantime, we're just going to take a break, figure it out, spend some time together chatting about these things, free up our Thursdays for a few weeks. And then at the end of, the output of that will be that at the end of March, we will come back different and hopefully better for it. And sexy. So in the meantime, if you want to subscribe and maybe you want to catch up, you've got some time. You can catch up on all the episodes you've missed, the previous 200 plus, because there are more than 200, because there's other shows.
I mean, just ones I'm in, to be honest, I wouldn't bother otherwise.
Well, I mean, I'm in there further back, and I like to think I'm pretty cool. Yeah, exactly. Let people make their own minds up about that. But we're on iTunes, YouTube, Google Podcasts. Again,
Pandora.
Those things. Not Pandora. Stop it.
Pianolas.
Pianissimo.
That's my prediction. The next hipster thing will be you can get your podcast delivered on a pianola roll.
We shall see if that pans out. Who knows? So we're on iTunes, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Those things aren't going anywhere. They are staying. They're going to be there. I will never take the feeds down unless I'm forced to by some hands more powerful than mine. And they'd have to be, Yeah,
it's got big hands.
Yeah, well, this is it. So there's that, if nothing else.
I once saw him pick up a baby by its face.
I didn't do that. It was a football.
Oh.
Yeah.
I once saw him pick up a baby by its football.
Yeah, there you go. That sounds about right. That's close enough. So the feeds are all there. They're not going anywhere. You can catch up. In the meantime, you've got 200 episodes to work your way back through, hundreds of hours of wonderful Star Wars content.
At least 400. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. As an average, probably,
Yeah, probably about that.
Least. Yeah, that sounds about right. So you've got all those options.
Yeah.
As to Patreon, so we do have a patreon.com/talkstarwars. I will be pausing it for March because it seems hardly fair for the listeners to pay when we're not doing anything. Sounds fair, right?
Yeah.
So March, I've done inquiries with Patreon in order to figure out how late I can leave it, basically. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the Patreon in March, so the people who are already paying won't have to pay for no reason. Which, like I say, I think is fair enough.
Totally.
People should feel free to contribute, and we're very happy and very grateful when people do, but we have to be doing something in return.
Absolutely.
And if we're not meeting that, then
that's how commerce works.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is the market at work.
Yeah.
So until that point that we're, up and running with the new format, I will restart it the day we're back. Basically. So the first time there's a Patreon, the deal will be the same. $1, one tier, ad-free podcast and everything like that. It will stay the same. So the tiers will stay the same for now.
All right.
In future, depending on what format it takes, maybe we can start talking about other stuff. But for now, it will be business as usual, $1 a month, ad-free, podcast comes early. So as soon as there is a new podcast, I will unpause it, upload the new podcast, and away we go. So it'll be like nothing changed.
Banging.
In the meantime. So that will be happening, when the time comes. That will be one of the things I will start up again when the time is right. Until then, I will pause it. I say it should just be for the month of March. I see no reason why it wouldn't be the month of March because, like I say, the 30th is in my head, so that makes sense.
Cool.
Brad.
Yes.
If people can't go 6 weeks without hearing your dulcet tones, how might they remedy this?
Well, the best thing to do is to check out Fire When Ready, Adventures in Star Wars at Tabletop Gaming on emotionally14.com, which will keep going, unlike some slackers, apparently. You'll be able to get all of our episodes on emotionally14.com and on Emotionally14's YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at FireWinReadyUK for all kind of behind the scenes photos and nonsense from us. And if you just can't cope without me popping up and making snarky comments about The Last Jedi, then you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RealBradHB.
Nice.
If you're feeling especially inclined, then you can also, of course, go to Audible or to Amazon or through Emotionally 14's Amazon affiliate link and buy some of my books, please. I have bills to pay.
Yes, indeed. And the easiest way to do that would be to go to any episode of Talk Star Wars with Brad on it, and there's a link at the bottom, and you can go, and you can go from there to Amazon directly. And then it's all the books are there, and you can just go ahead and buy them.
Can't make it easier other than me coming to your house and reading to you. I'm not going to do that. It's not tax deductible.
No, exactly. So that's the easiest way, and it's going to be certainly the one that's going to get you results.
Yes, and
we care about results. Damn it.
Yes. Where are we going to find you, Rob?
So the best place to find me is probably Twitter or Instagram at Rob Wade Vision. And
you should post more.
Yeah, well, I need to do some fun stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Twitter and Instagram at Rob Wade Vision. And like I said, the DMs are open. If you want to talk about this stuff, I realize that this is, I haven't done a big tease like, there's a big announcement coming in the next Talk Star Wars and there's things like that. There's a deliberate reason for that, which I find that stuff really crass when it comes to anybody who's not famous, which I would say is certainly qualifies me. And so I appreciate that I've blindsided some people. Some people are kind of already aware of this stuff. Like behind the scenes, I've talked to some of the Commonwealth and things like that. But so yeah, DMs are open. If you want to talk about it, then get in touch. Star Wars Commonwealth Podcast Network, 7 great shows: Tumbling Saber, Generation X-Wing, Rogue Squadron, Nerd Room, San Diego Sabers, Sandcrawler Cast, Talk Star Wars. We'll be back. Thank you very much for listening to episode 200. We will see you again on or around March the 30th for the next whatever Talk Star Wars ends up being. So until then, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and as always, may the Force be with you.
Love you.